Hello and good evening, everyone, or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're listening to this LinkedIn Live. My name is Naishad Gadani, and I'm coming to you from Melbourne. And today is 249th episode of Career Care Package, and we are celebrating 250th episode next week. So you're welcome to send us cash donation or any Amazon, yeah, whatever that you please like. We are all accepting of that. But we are really excited to continue the tradition to come on and talk to you guys every Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. And in this series, we are so excited to have Serena here today. Um, she has been on our show previously and it always brings new ideas and insights from the world of quiet warriors. I like that word rather than introvert because I think that has got a lot of negative things. Oh, are you introvert? Poor you. But if you say you are a quiet warrior, that's really says something. So I really like the that twist or reframing that that language, Serena. So we are excited to talk to you about what to do when you are now forced or compelled to go from work from home, which a lot of people thrived, and especially quiet warriors really thrived on that. And now you've been asked to go and work in the office, and suddenly the world changes. So, I would love to hear your views on that one. And as always, if you've got questions, anecdotes, or stories that if you want to talk about, please drop in a message, and we'll love to take your questions as well with Serena. But before that, let's welcome Caroline Brown.
Thanks, Nation. It's absolutely great to be here. And I think, we've heard a lot of stuff about um, getting people back in the office, but I speak to a lot of managers who are like, yes, we'll get the gang back together and it'll be so great to work face to face. And there's a big disconnect, between people not wanting to come back, but not a lot of people are actually asking employees about their real feelings. It might be surface level stuff and reasons that people give, like, oh, it's too long a commute, it's too cold, it doesn't fit with my routine. But underneath that, I think there's a real fear with a lot of people and a justifiable fear. So, absolutely fantastic to have you here today, Serena, to talk on this very topic. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Nesha. Thank you, Carolyn, for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So, will I kick off the discussion and fire a question at Serena? So, um, you do a lot. I've noticed on Facebook and on LinkedIn and various platforms that you're really busy with your introvert community around social activities. And I'm really interested in what you're hearing from people around this idea of needing to come out from behind the desk or behind the computer screen and back into the office. What are people telling you?
What I'm sensing from people is there is this deep reluctance because we've grown comfortable over the last 2 years working remotely. And the transformation, I think the benefits for a lot of people, not just introverts, but I think people in general, just experiencing that, this is possible, that you can still be productive working from home. You don't have to commute. You save so much time. You save your energy, and you learn to prioritize your time so much better, even though it might seem quite distracting working from home, especially for people with young families and other commitments going on. But I think on the whole, we've all learned that this model works really, really well. And
Mm,
so underneath there would be a bit of dread for the introverts, particularly, who love being in their low stimulation kind of
mm,
environment where they can control many of the variables that would have made working in the office stressful. And so then the thinking would be, if I go back to the office now, what's going to change? How
mm,
do I how do I transition and plug back into that way of working without sacrificing physical health, mental health, productivity, other commitments, and having that kind of flexibility and not feeling, how do I deal with the guilt that might come up?
mm,
If my manager says to me, oh, we need to be part of the team, we need to get the whole team back together, let's do teaming. It's not possible to have teaming without people physically in the office. And the
mm,
introvert might not have the confidence to then speak up and say, but I don't agree, and here's why. So I
Mm.
think that would be a bit of the tension that's being felt by the introverts who are being asked or strongly encouraged, to go back to the office.
Because often, people that get promoted into leadership positions are more out there, the more extroverted and do get that energy. And, they say there's a better dynamic when the team's back together. But, a lot of that is possibly what they want. Do you know what I mean? So,
Hmm.
why do you think that, what's your take on why, when it seems to be working for a lot of people who work from home, um, why is that sort of impetus coming to get people back in the office, do you think?
I think one aspect is that our work culture is generally extrovert biased.
Mm,
So we've for a long time we've been conditioned, to showing up and to being in a place where everyone can see us and we can see other people. And that doesn't include the aspect of making sure that a workplace caters to all kinds of personalities, all kinds of energy types. In general, I would say most workplaces are designed to be such that people are forced to be together a
mm,
lot of the time. Group meetings and open cubicles, the open plan office kind of idea, all about efficiency, all about getting things done quickly. Whereas with introverts, the, the tendency is towards productivity on their own, as in they work best when they are in a quiet space and they're not being distracted, they're not being disturbed. They can do their deep work, which is what they are best at. And introverts, they don't talk as much because they're busy processing. They think first and they talk later. So they
mm,
spend more time reflecting, they spend more time researching, they spend more time writing things down. Whereas extroverts, they get their energy from talking. They talk
mm,
aloud their thoughts. They think aloud. So there's a conflict there. So if you have an environment where the culture, is very much extroverted, and the idea is, if you look at some job descriptions, a lot of companies still describe themselves as dynamic and fast-paced environment, like it's a really good thing. And the idea of, oh, we're all a family. And those are words that would frighten an introvert. So we're looking at how do we balance the workplace so that, you have a space for everyone. So you might have, is it possible to have some quiet spaces set aside? Is it possible for an introvert to say, I want to do some deep work now and I don't want to be disturbed? So I'll book the conference room, and no one's going to judge them for sort of cutting themselves off and not wanting to talk to anybody for the next 4 hours because they're going to be doing some deep work. And as we know from the book itself, it's just not possible to multitask and produce deep work. That's not how it works. You need
mm,
that concentration, you need that space, you need the uninterruption to go really, really deep into a subject, which is what introverts are strong at. And so we need to look at also how do workplaces become, how do managers, supervisors, anyone in a leadership position who has a say in the setup of spaces, is it possible for them to start having that discussion with their quieter employees, to ask them
mm,
what do they need to help them thrive, to help them function really well if they want them to come back to work full time?
mm, mm. Absolutely.
I think I've never noticed that phrases that companies use, and it would how it impacts how that is not inclusive and probably not even representing what their the work culture is. I think that's I've never noticed it from that perspective, Serena. But can you imagine? I think we are all guilty of, especially guilty of talking to people about how to demonstrate confidence and how to do this and blah blah blah. But that's not particularly inclusive. And I think in inclusion, in my view, we're not looking at introvert as a as include them too. We will obviously talk about the other inclusions which are also particularly relevant and important. But introverts or people who are quiet, more or less, and not really including them. I don't know whether I've read a listened to a talk on the same, where how do you really include them? And you should harness the power of people who are quiet. And how do you do that? But even space design, I've never heard of that, honestly.
Mm.
How a space design or how an office is structured can really benefit people to participate. And I can share that even as an ambivert, or most likely an extrovert, I also found it difficult to go back to work. And people who are quiet, they would find it extra hard to again go back. I can just cite one example, or the 2021, and I had to go and attend end of the year function for an association, and it was just mind-bogglingly overwhelming. One was, it was in a pub. I don't drink, and it was loud music, just many people chatting. It was an absolute overload of senses, and I just did not know what how to process these things. Right, at one point I decided to walk out and said, you know what, I'll just tell myself that it wasn't for me, until met somebody and said, now relaxes it down and do that. So what are some of the things that, in like, people who are quiet can do? How do they kind of prepare? Can they talk to somebody beforehand? uh, or there are some other triggers that they can use, or there are some habits that they can develop beforehand, before they transition into work from home to work in the office?
I think that's a really good question. And introverts definitely benefit from preparation because the last thing an introvert needs is to be thrown into a situation and feel like they're ambushed. So giving them plenty of lead time. And also, the introvert can start thinking about how they can influence and impact the work environment because this is not just about themselves. It's not just for their own benefit now. There will be other introverts in the office as well, and other people who may be highly sensitive. You mentioned the sensory overload. There are people who have a challenge around that. So how do we, tone down the amount of stimulation going on? Is it possible, for instance, for the company to consider investing in noise canceling headphones? And if that person puts on the headphone, it means that they are doing deep work. Please don't disturb. And just having that greater awareness in the workplace that there are different personality types, that different people thrive in different settings, and for each person to take a greater responsibility for the way they project themselves while they are at work. Just
Mm.
being more mindful, more considerate, more aware. It might even be a good time for the introverted employee to raise with their supervisor the possibility of information sessions around the differences between introvert, extrovert, ambivert. What does it mean? Having someone come in and talk about those things so that because a lot of times we function at a very surface level because we are very cautious and reserved in at a workplace. We don't want to say too much, or we don't want to present ourselves in a way that makes us look incompetent or that makes us feel vulnerable. So if it is possible to even facilitate a discussion around these different personality types, others will start feeling more encouraged to speak up. And the supervisor who is open to hearing different points of view will also, will benefit. The whole organization benefits when more people have that awareness, and it's no longer like a taboo subject. The introvert doesn't have to like skirt around, trying to find ways out of it when it can be discussed openly, because it's not a disease or anything. It's just a different way of working.
Mm. It's funny, isn't it? Because I look into my times in recruiting, and a lot of the recruitment processes are biased, I think, towards people. Like, always in an ad is good communication and interpersonal skills, and you're always looking for people that can explain how they could impact your organization and how they love working in teams, and like it's all very extrovert oriented, that whole hiring type process. And I imagine that's a lot of people that that are on the more introverted part of the spectrum. There's a lot of forcing yourself into that kind of fit and culture. And some of the things that you're saying around what managers can do around sort of creating a safe place for everyone to be themselves. And when you create that, you see how people really and truly do their best work, I suppose.
Very much so. In fact, I think there was a recent study, did it come out of Harvard or Stanford? I can't remember, where they did an extensive study across a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand employees. And that was what they discovered, that, when you are allowed to be your authentic self, it actually increases productivity at the workplace. So
Mm.
it makes business sense for organizations to equip themselves with this kind of business intelligence, to know that
Mm.
there are employees that thrive differently if handled differently and managed differently, and given different amounts of flexibility, autonomy, and encouragement, and so on. And then working the strategies to suit different people, and of course then it ticks off the inclusion and the safety and workplace well-being and mental health and all those important things that we are talking about a lot nowadays.
Mm. I think also it's a test of leadership skills, isn't it? Because there was nothing like a global pandemic to accelerate digital transformation and people working remotely. And one of the biggest issues around that was trust of your employee, to get them to, to understand that they're mature adults and will do things if they're accountable for them. So it's been a real test of trust and letting go and leadership skills. And you think that after like 2 years of people working from home and producing things from home and so forth, that issue wouldn't be there as much. It would have helped leaders become better leaders and help them manage different styles of people working and so forth. So yeah.
I think there's also a difference in that, yes, over the 2 years there was that digital transformation, and what there was that more ready acceptance and willingness to consider, because one important factor was taken away and that was out of the consideration. And that was the fact that people could not, it was not possible to meet together at all. But now that there is that possibility thrown back again, it confuses. And when we are confused, I think the default is that we go back to the way things were before. And for a
Mm.
lot of organizations, the way things were before is how they would like it to be, because there is that element of control. And you mentioned trust, Carolyn. And
Mm.
trust is foundational to a good relationship, good rapport, communication, and productivity, and all those things that an organization needs to
Mm.
to produce and to meet its business goals. So without that, once that trust starts getting, when it's a bit unclear again, because now there is the option to work from home or not to work from home, most organizations, I believe, are still more of the traditional kind of thinking. And it would
Mm.
be it would be quite interesting to see how many organizations are prepared to actually give maximum autonomy and flexibility in allowing their employees to choose which way they prefer to work.
Mm.
Have you also observed that as a lot of people have changed jobs during this time, and especially if you are like considering, let's say, before COVID, you'd still go to work as a quiet warrior. You still go to work and you kind of start to adjust yourself because you are physically there. But it's kind of you start work in a very hybrid environment. A lot of people started work during this time, and now kind of suddenly you're going to meet your your office parents or office siblings and everybody else for the first time, right, after many years. Do you think that they taking going back to the idea that they can also take some ownership of how they prefer to work? How do they really communicate their preferences, especially in a new work environment? Is it better to kind of explain to them, and what are some of the things that they can do to educate other people, especially the leaders or managers, about how do they want to work and what are their preferences, and how do they mitigate the whole thing?
That's a really good question. So you're talking about the introvert's self-responsibility in creating the kind of workplace environment that helps them to thrive. So I think the most important thing to start with would be a one-on-one discussion with the supervisor before that transition happens, in the lead up to it, the preparation time, and to talk about, what's the space that they can operate in, as in how much leeway do they get to decide, to start talking, and so find a way to meet in the middle, look for the common ground. And of course, the introvert also needs to take responsibility for how they present and project themselves, as in, it's not just about themselves and their own personal benefit. It's also because when they are productive, everybody benefits. And it's also about the other introverts in the workplace. So it's about creating a safer, a healthier, a more inclusive workplace, which is surely one of the organization's goals. So if the introvert can present it as, not just for their own personal benefit, but also for the organization's benefit, I think that would make the manager or the supervisor, much more likely to listen and to consider. So it's very much about the communication ability and the influence ability. Um, Negotiation skills, of course, are helpful as well. So the introvert needs to come from a place of, this is what I found. This is what the research shows, because those are the introvert strengths, right? Doing research, thinking through things, reflecting, um, checking things up properly, and presenting something that has been thoroughly looked at from every angle. So we want to leverage the introverts, abilities in those things, and use them, and flip them such that they are for the organization's benefit as well. So almost like presenting a business case. And then for themselves to prepare some baby steps for themselves to make that transition. And it's really important for the introvert too to recalibrate their mindset. So instead of like starting off with, oh, I have to go back to work, and I really hate the idea, I'm so anxious, I'm not looking forward to this at all. Look at it more from the point of view, let's see how we can make this work. Let's see how I can do this so that, it's not just me that benefits, but my team, as well as the organization as a whole. That how can I help the cause, um, of the quieter ones, the ones who were not looked after properly, perhaps during before COVID times? Is there a way our organization can advance in this area, can improve in this area? What can I do about it? So it's more also from a place of service, a place of contribution, and how can I, as an introvert, contribute to this feeling of building the social connection? Because everyone needs that connection, not just extroverts. Introverts need to feel a sense of belonging in the organization as well. It's just that we have a different way of going about it. So maybe for the introvert, it might be catching up, one on one with their team. It might be a small group kind of a meeting, not too many meetings to start off with. So knowing your own triggers, your own limits, setting some healthy boundaries, because you've gone from working completely remotely to now having to interact with people. And it will take some time to adjust. You need to check your own energy levels and see how you go. Let's say you have to go back to the office 3 times a week. How would that work out on a daily basis? Commute times, think of your energy time, think of what you normally do with that time and what is going to change, and then how would you have to adjust. And so take it slowly at the start, and then watch how you yourself have changed, or and how you are able to adapt, or whether you need to make further changes.
Mm. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think one of the things about, they say about being in social isolation, that it makes you, you're obviously anxious about, the very thing you need is, well, one of the things you need is that people contact, but you become more anxious about that people contact, and it drives a bit of a wedge. And I think I read another interesting article in The Guardian about catastrophizing. So when we're stressed and fearful, we go straight to the worst possible outcome of a scenario, and you need to be talked back off the ledge, basically. So maybe talking to people about, well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen, in this scenario, and where have I succeeded when I put myself out of my comfort zone again. I really like the idea of the baby steps as well, because sometimes, just one step leads to the next step, leads to the next step. And often I think, just picking up on another point around, that negotiation, often people forget just to ask, just to express actually, I really worked well from working from home, and I was really productive because it was a quiet environment. Can I try 2 days a week at home for the big projects, and come back into the office on those other days? That's a blend of work that makes me really productive, and therefore obviously benefits you as well. So I think people do forget. We do tend to overthink and overcomplicate, when sometimes it's just a simple ask for what you want that you need to do.
I agree with you there, Carolyn. And introverts, particularly, can find it quite hard to ask for the things that we need. Sometimes
Mm,
it's because we don't feel that we have a right to ask. It's almost like we are still in the mentality of the good student who has to put the hand up first and ask for permission to speak and ask for
mm,
permission to contribute and to say something. But we are actually mature adults now with a lot of
mm,
lived experience, a lot of work skills, and so on. And we, as you say, we do forget to do the simplest thing, and that is to start by asking. And
mm,
also, I think the other thing that might be helpful for managers who are, because they have their own business outcomes to satisfy, and they have other people that they report to, and so on, being part of the general machinery, is also to make it a trial period. So it minimizes some of the risks for them if they have to explain to a higher up, why this particular employee needs this amount of time working from home. You could frame it such that it is a trial period for, say, let's say, try it for 4 weeks, and it's, I'll come back to you and report, and it will look at my outcomes and see what has happened and whether it has been better, been worse, and then talk about it again. And so
mm,
knowing that that is just a temporary thing, I think will ease some of the anxiety of the higher ups who are very much attached to the old way of doing things.
mm. Yep.
Do you think that the Australian managers or leaders are warming up to the idea of really recognizing this, talent that they might be missing on? I think you rightly pointed out it's a business case too, that you're allowing people to be their self around, how do they want to work and what are their preferences, right?
Hmm.
But do you think that the Australian leaders are starting to warm up to the idea? They are far more accepting. And secondly, is that, I this is for my view on it. I might be completely wrong, but some introverts might just be trying to show that, look, I'm part of this. Okay, I'm not just, so they would probably put a different persona completely from what they really who they really are. And yeah, so what's your take on that? Are managers are becoming more and more aware and more accepting and kind of welcoming this disclosure?
I don't know about welcoming the disclosure
Mm,
as such, Nation,
mm,
but I think there is more and more awareness around the different personality types and the fact that there are up to 50%, depending on what research you look at, up to 50% of the population are introverts. And there has been so much said by prominent, psychologists and writers and experts on this topic that i- they can't not know that there is this segment of their team that is quiet but also does really, really good work. I'm sure they're already aware of it. What they are perhaps um, still needing to work on is how to bridge that gap and bring more of these quiet talents into the main arena, encouraging them more to speak up at meetings or to contribute in writing, or giving them the support that they need to become leaders, because we know from research that a lot of good leaders are actually introverts, and a lot
Mm,
of really high profile and successful people are introverts. The research is out there. The thing is that people are very organizations can be very attached to their corporate identity, to the way things are done, to the structure, to the systems and the processes. And for them to overhaul all these things takes time. It also
mm,
takes persistence. It takes, people to champion these things and drive these things, be passionate enough to keep talking about these things until there is that groundswell of change. So right
mm.
now, I think we're still at the beginning of it, for Australia at least.
I think
But it is a
people
good
do.
direction.
Sorry, I
Sorry.
interrupt. I was just going to say, I think people do mistake quietness with a lack of confidence, lack of leadership, um, lack of competence, those sorts of things. I think it's like there is a real education, and the work that you do, with, now launching your podcast and with your groups, and Megumi as well. With her book Quietly Powerful, there is this sort of slowly growing shoots of awareness around. You don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most capable of being a leader. Sometimes the person that's got that real listening skill and that evaluation skill is the person that's best able to come up with the best and the most influential person in the group, because they've listened to everyone. So I think the work that you're doing and other people are doing is absolutely fantastic in that area.
Thank you.
About to say something, Nish?
No, I was just going to tell to the audience, if you've got any anecdotes, if you want any stories, if you've got any questions, we are still here with Serena. We're going to talk to her about a couple more things, and also Serena's got her podcast. So congratulations, Serena. We'll put the link in the chat box for people to. It's not just for people who are quiet. Okay, if you are not quiet, you can still go and listen to that, because I think we still meet people in our social life too who are quiet, or who remain quiet. One of my uncle is the most quiet person that I've met, but he's extraordinarily talented. He worked with Indian Space Research Organization, and he was one of the gem in our family, and he's became the director in that. But very quiet. He would, if we talk about him, he would say, no, look, that's fine, I did whatever that I could. And it was quite, um but we I always felt that you should talk to people, you should do this and that. But no, it's just fundamentally, very quiet. But he found something that he really can put his energy behind. That's another one that I wanted to kind of touch on, that because it's also quite, you know kind of challenging to really find something that in this noise of, do this, do that, come on, make it big, blah blah blah. For somebody who's quiet, to find a career that will allow them to flourish, or that will allow them to be themselves, or they will not be judged, based on their, how they work and how they get energized. How, because you have also went through similar challenges, right? So tell us about how have you seen quiet, people really navigate that thing about what career, and where do I get information, and who do I talk about? Because talking about career, that also is a barrier even for people who consider themselves extrovert, right? It's a barrier for them too, and for people who are quiet, it could be quite challenging, Serena.
Hmm. I agree with you, but that's because we are thinking in terms of I need to find a career that fits my strengths, fits my talents, fits my life purpose, fits my values, and so on. And sometimes the journey is not a linear one. Carolyn and I were talking about that this morning. In fact, I think for most people it is not linear, but we have been trained, we have been conditioned, to start with a plan A and then have a plan B, always have a plan B, something to fall back on just in case things don't work out. And so we become very attached to the need for certainty and the need for,
Hmm.
I need to know the answers, I need to know the thing up front, I need to have all my exits prepared, I need to know what the next step is. And sometimes life that just doesn't work that way. It's more about adapting when the situation arises. Can I be the person that rises to the occasion and responds to this particular challenge with courage, with resilience, with all the values that I believe in, the highest values? Can I become a better and stronger person because of this setback? And can I trust that I will find my way to the next step and the next step, even though I don't know yet what the final outcome will be? I don't know what the next iteration will be, because it's like the design process, isn't it? Design thinking. You're constantly refining, you're reiterating. You don't really know, but you make little, baby steps along the way. You think you might know what the next step is, and then you do it. but there's no guarantee that the next step is the right step. Maybe there isn't a right step. Maybe it's a series of, divinely guided steps, if you will. Sometimes people respond to what they call divine nudges. You meet the right person at the right time, a certain door closes, another door opens, and you can't predict these things in advance. So, to anybody who is navigating career change, I would say, first of all, know yourself. Take time to really know yourself, especially after, let's say 35, where we become a bit clearer about our values and what's most important in our lives. And by that time, certain life changes have happened. And knowing, of course, that in every season of life, you have the opportunity to revisit those values and reprioritize again. So nothing is set in stone, and which is an exciting thing, but it's also very frightening for some people who feel that I need to know, I need to know before I put my foot out of my comfort zone. So I say, instead of saying put your foot out of your comfort zone, how about you expand your comfort zone so that you've got a bigger playground to play in? I think we've forgotten that there is also that element of adventure and exploring and finding out, what's new, what's around the corner that I haven't checked out yet. I haven't, hasn't come to my attention yet because that bush is blocking the path, so I need to go around. I need to climb a little higher so I can get a better vantage point. And so I think with age and with wisdom and maturity, we realize that it's not quite so simple, but it's also exciting because it's an adventure. And I think we need to reclaim that sense of curiosity to know, regardless of what's around the corner, what's behind that bush, I can handle it.
Mm.
I have developed enough life skills and professional skills. And if I don't have it, I will ask, I will go find out, I will go talk to people. So for introverts, I think particularly the challenge is learning that they don't have to have all the answers in themselves first. It's okay to not know, but I'll start from where I am now and I will
Mm.
grow to become that person that can handle this situation. And I'll go talk to people, even if I don't like talking to people, because I want to find out. I'm curious. I want to get some answers. And I'm humble enough to admit that I don't know everything. In fact, I don't know a lot of things. But if I collaborate, if I go networking, which is another thing that introverts, sort of balk at, but it's got its uses. If I network, expand my circle, talk to more people, express myself more, ask for what I need, which is what we talked about, the answers will come
Mm.
because there is collective wisdom out there. It doesn't have to stop with me and with what I know or don't know.
Mm. It's really interesting that you're saying that about that level of like experimentation and just expanding your realm of comfort zone. And I think one of the things that's really would be really interesting is like to, and Daniel Soloki talks about this a lot, is like that felt sense. So you're going out and you're at what point are you feeling that you've got to retreat from something? Maybe that's just not where you're supposed to be in that space, or if you have to force yourself to get up every morning to go and do what you do, or you procrastinate a lot, or do you know what I mean? That real felt sense can be a real indicator. And what are you doing when time's flown? You're not noticing, you're not clock watching, you're totally absorbed in what you do, like really paying close attention. I spent on that kind of energy level of where you're spending your time, because it's a real indicator of you know I, probably where you sit on that introvert and extrovert kind of spectrum, and what fills your cup basically, as well, because a lot of the time we're so disconnected. And I think that's what I really discovered from my taking a break is we're so disconnected from ourselves in our society. We're always on our devices or distracting ourselves or busy or running around after kids or family or whatever. We forget to just stop and check in and go, how am I, what am I feeling about what I'm doing right now? Because I've got all of this artificial stimuli going on. And, that sense of just checking in with yourself with whatever you're doing is probably a gift that you can give to yourself, I think.
I really like your shared what you shared there about the felt senses
Mm.
and the idea of checking in to yourself, because you're right. Most of us are either in the past or in the present. either in the past or in the future. We're either thinking about something that's already over and which we can't change, or else
mm,
we're thinking about something that is coming up. And like what Nishad say, we're catastrophizing, right? Putting the worst possible spin on it, and then getting ourselves all worked up and anxious. But very few of us have mastered the ability to be present, like here and now, and to be
mm,
fully in the body, like here.
mm,
Most of us are like, digitally distracted, and that is just part of the modern way of life. But you're
mm,
right, we need to keep reconnecting,
mm,
tuning in again, making sure we are at the right station and
mm,
not listening to a lot of static which is overwhelming us.
mm. Absolutely. If you've got questions for Serena and you're watching this, please don't forget to put them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. If any questions about getting back to work or tapping into your introvert strengths, or um, do you have any sort of um, physical kind of tips that think people can do? Like not so much sort of the planning and strategizing and that type of thing, but physical activities that are really helpful for introverts to put their put themselves back out there again.
One of them would be finding a group of people that you enjoy hanging out with. If all that stopped during the lockdowns, and it's now now looking at reconnecting with people socially, and you don't have any idea of how to do it. For introverts, for instance, we have an introvert community of over 2,000 people now, where we have regular meetups in person, and it's just a very gentle, very low hype way for people to socially connect. So there's no expectation of elevator pitches or selling anything or networking. Even we don't even call it those things. It's more like we go for a walk in Fitzroy Gardens and we finish up with a coffee, and most people are quite happy with that format. It's just very low key, no particular agenda, no structure. And the amazing thing is when people feel that this is their tribe, like because they have self-identified as introverts in coming along, and they realize everybody else is like them pretty much, all the barriers kind of just fall away. And then you
Mm,
see them starting to chat and relax and laugh and joke and exchanging numbers and asking to keep in touch and so on, because they've enjoyed that time so much. You've taken away a lot of the barriers of socializing for introverts. So that's one gentle easy way of doing it, just to meet like-minded people, make time to have a very low key kind of way of reconnecting with society. Another thing I think is physical movement is really, really important. I think a lot of us became fitter, during the lockdowns because we were stuck at home, and then we spent more time exercising and keeping fit. So now that we are going back to work, how do we keep that kind of a routine going? Because it's so important, not just for physical health, but mental health as well. Just
mm,
knowing that you have this time where you are dedicating it to your own health, your own body, your own level of fitness. What are some ways I can do that, from the workplace? Can I use my lunch hour to go for a walk, get some extra sunshine and vitamin D, make sure that I take a healthy meal from home that I've made because I was eating healthily when I was at home, and I don't want to, go back to just coffee and fast food or something, or quick sandwich, and I don't want to eat at my desk either because that would set back my health. So you need that physical movement, you need the social connection as well. And I think that probably those two would be a good gentle way to kickstart that transition back.
fantastic.
Excellent. Sorry, I was also frantically making some notes because I've got an idea of doing a visual sketch. So I was just frantically
You
trying to.
multitasking niche.
Yeah, I know, I know. I should not acknowledge that at least on LinkedIn Live, right? I can acknowledge it privately. But yeah, but look, Serena, thank you very much for coming along.
Yeah.
You've been absolutely sensational. I really like the clarity that you have about some of the real issues faced, or challenges, whatever, or the reflections of people who are quiet. I think that's the word that I'm going to use. I don't think so that introvert is not particularly a great word. So I have to remind myself quietly, quiet,
Or
people who are
just be.
quiet. That's right. That also includes me when my kids talk to me. I don't know. But I know it's absolutely fascinating to catch up, and thank you very much for coming along on a very, very short notice, as well. We would love to obviously now since things have opened up, our catch up is due. So we should try to catch up for a coffee or lunch or something fairly soon before the lockdown 7.0 happens. But yeah, I'm really thankful. We are absolutely thankful for you to come along and share some insights.
Very welcome. A great pleasure to be here. And thank you for the work that both of you do.
Oh, thank you. So, the name of your podcast, do you want to share that with everybody and tell people what it's about before we wrap up, Serena?
Yes, certainly. So it's called the Quiet Warrior podcast. And the reason for Quiet Warrior is because we are looking at people not just as quiet achievers who get things done in the background, that the competent but out of the frame person whose presence doesn't really register sometimes. We're talking about people making themselves known, learning to speak up when needed, speaking up not just for themselves, but for other people as well. Because sometimes there are bigger causes, there are worthy things to talk about. And so we
Mm.
want to talk about how a person can grow from just being a quiet achiever to being a quiet warrior. So the idea of the podcast is not just talking about the myths and stereotypes around introversion, but also how can a person develop and grow and evolve into that kind of a person that may be quiet in personality, but is also very impactful, influential in a deeper and different way.
Absolute lovely idea, and I think it's well needed. So, we'll put a link in the comments. Um, and sorry, Nasha's been busy multitasking, and there it is. So, yeah, thanks again for joining us. So, if you're watching this, please follow the hashtag Career Care Package. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's our 250th show next week, and typical Nation and I were like, "What are we gonna do?" So
Yeah,
we've
so
got
we
a
can, if you want to be part of it, if you want to come along, please feel free. Just let us know so that we can send you the link to connect in advance. I don't know. We've got an idea to play a kind of a game with people as well. But yeah, we want to do something really interesting. So if you've got ideas, feel free to drop us a line or call us, and we'll be happy to include them. And again, have a great evening. Everyone have a great rest of the week, and we look forward to meeting you next Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. Melbourne time. Until then, bye.
bye everyone.